first moved into Maplewood Lane, I thought I had finally found the perfect neighborhood. The lawns were trimmed like magazine covers. Kids rode their bikes in neat little packs. And every evening the smell of barbecues and fresh-baked pies floated through the air. I had grown up in apartments and noisy city streets, so this place felt like stepping into a commercial for the American dream. People waved at me when I pulled into the driveway. Couples stopped by to introduce themselves, and within the first week I was invited to a block party. It felt too good to be true, and as I would learn, it was. The block party was where I noticed the first strange detail. Every household brought a dish. But when I went down the long buffet table, every plate was almost the same. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Different containers, slightly different seasonings, but the same exact meal. When I asked a man named Clark if this was some kind of tradition, he gave me a smile that was warm on the surface but hollow in his eyes. "We just like consistency here," he said. His wife nodded along without a word, her smile fixed like a doll's. At first I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a small-town quirk, a joke I didn't get. But as weeks passed, I kept noticing things. Every morning, without fail, the men left for work at the same exact time, 7:15, driving similar gray sedans. Every afternoon, the women could be seen watering their lawns, all wearing long pastel dresses no matter the weather. At dusk, the kids gathered in the cul-de-sac and sang the same song while clapping in rhythm. I never recognized the melody. It wasn't any nursery rhyme I knew. One night, as I sat in my living room watching TV, I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was a late-night barbecue, but when I peeked through the blinds, I froze. The entire neighborhood was standing in the street, all of them holding candles, all of them facing my house. No one moved. No one spoke. They stood there for what felt like hours, the candle flames flickering in the dark. When I blinked and looked again, the street was empty, as if it had never happened. The next morning, Clark knocked on my door with a plate of cookies. His smile was just as practiced as before. "We hope you're settling in," he said. I wanted to ask him about the night before, but something in his expression warned me not to. Instead, I thanked him, closed the door, and threw the cookies in the trash. I decided to test them. The next evening, when all the men left their houses at 7:15, I sat in my car and waited. They didn't drive far, just around the block, then parked at the community center 2 streets over. I followed on foot, sticking to the shadows. Through the dusty windows of the center, I saw them. Dozens of men in a circle, heads bowed, chanting in low, steady voices. At the center of the room was a table covered in black cloth, and on it, something that looked disturbingly like a human mask made of stitched skin. I ran home before anyone saw me, heart slamming against my ribs. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the image of their faces, calm and focused, as if what they were doing was completely normal. Days turned into weeks. I kept my head down, but the neighborhood seemed to tighten around me. Neighbors dropped by constantly, always with that same polite smile, always asking if I felt at home. The kids sang louder, their voices echoing into my walls. And then I started noticing things inside my house. My coffee mugs would be rearranged. My front door would be unlocked even though I remembered locking it. Once I came home to find a single candle burning in the middle of my living room, no sign of how it got there. I called the police. They came out, looked around, and assured me nothing was wrong. But the way they glanced at my neighbors and lowered their voices told me they knew. They knew, and they weren't going to help. The breaking point came one night when I woke to the sound of footsteps in my backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and looked out the window. At least 20 neighbors were standing in a circle around my shed, all holding candles, all humming that same eerie tune. The shed door was open. I knew I had locked it. When I forced myself outside, they didn't scatter or act surprised. They just turned their heads toward me in perfect unison, their humming never breaking. I yelled at them, demanded they leave. Clark stepped forward, his smile wider than I'd ever seen it. "It's almost time," he said softly. "You'll understand soon." The next day I packed my car. I didn't care about the mortgage, the moving expenses, anything. I just needed out. But when I tried to drive away, the road at the end of the street was blocked by every gray sedan from the neighborhood. Dozens of them parked side by side, doors shut, no drivers in sight. I turned around, only to find Clark standing in the middle of the street, his wife and children behind him. "Leaving already?" he asked, tilting his head. That night they came into my house. I don't know how, because I had barricaded every door and window, but I woke to find them standing around my bed. All of them. Men, women, children, their faces glowing in the candlelight. Clark held the stitched mask from the community center. "We welcome you," he said, his voice calm and final. "You are one of us now." When I screamed, they didn't react. The mask was lowered onto my face, the leather cold and damp against my skin. And the last thing I remember before darkness swallowed me was the sound of their voices rising together in a single wordless chant that rattled the walls. I don't know how much time has passed since then. I wake up in the mornings wearing the same pastel clothes as the others. I smile at new neighbors. I wave when they drive by. And when the sun goes down, I hold my candle like everyone else. If you're ever invited to live on Maplewood Lane, don't. The neighbors will be kind. The houses will be perfect. But once you're here, you'll never leave. I'm a crime reporter. For most of my career, I covered robberies, fires, and small-town scandals. But last year, I was assigned to investigate a series of missing persons cases that all led back to the same place, a city named Grenton. On paper, Grenton looked harmless. Population 22,000. A quiet industrial hub surrounded by forest. The kind of place no one ever thinks about. But in the past decade, more than 30 people had vanished within its limits. No bodies, no suspects, no official explanations. Just gone. My editor wanted a human interest piece, maybe a story about families of the missing. What I found was something else entirely. When I arrived, the first thing that struck me was how clean the city was. Not just tidy, but unnaturally spotless. No graffiti, no trash in the gutters, no broken windows. Even the air felt filtered, like someone had pressed reset on reality. The locals were polite, always greeting me with the same phrase, "Welcome to Grenton, where we care for our own." They said it with practiced smiles, their eyes never breaking contact with mine. I started by visiting the police station. The chief, a man named Harlow, sat behind a desk that looked like it had never been touched. I asked about the disappearances. His jaw tightened, but his smile didn't fade. "People come and go," he said. "Sometimes they don't want to be found. Grenton is a peaceful city. We keep it that way." He ended the interview abruptly, his hand resting just a little too close to the pistol on his hip. That night, I checked into the only hotel in town. The receptionist handed me a room key and then leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You shouldn't stay after dark," she whispered. When I asked what she meant, she straightened, her smile snapping back into place. Enjoy your stay in Grenton." The warning rattled me, so I stayed up, watching from my window. At midnight, the streets came alive. Hundreds of people walked in silence, all heading toward the center of town. They didn't speak, didn't even look around. Just moved like a single organism drawn by some unseen signal. I grabbed my camera and followed at a distance. They gathered in front of City Hall, a towering stone building with stained glass windows. At the top of the steps stood Chief Harlow, dressed in a black robe instead of his uniform. He raised his arms, and the crowd lowered to their knees in perfect unison. The stained glass glowed from inside, and through it I could see shapes moving, not human shapes, but writhing silhouettes that pressed against the glass as though trying to break free. The crowd began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, their voices blending into a sound that felt like it was vibrating inside my skull. I snapped a photo, and that was my mistake. The flash was faint, but it was enough. Hundreds of heads turned toward me at once. I ran, sprinting down alleys, through side streets, until I collapsed in the stairwell of my hotel. When I looked out the window, the streets were empty again, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, my camera was gone. The receptionist claimed no one had entered my room. When I demanded the security footage, she told me the system hadn't been working for years. Her smile never faltered. I considered leaving, but something wouldn't let me. Call it pride, call it curiosity, but I needed answers. I went to the local library, hoping to dig through archives. The history section was strange. Entire decades were missing, whole shelves empty. What remained were glossy picture books showing smiling crowds, parades, and community events, all with the same caption: "Grenton cares for its own." That phrase followed me everywhere. It was printed on banners, painted on shop windows, even stitched into the fabric of people's clothes. When I asked what it meant, everyone gave me the same answer, word for word. It means we belong. That evening, I interviewed a woman who had agreed to talk to me in secret. Her name was Marissa. She lived on the edge of town in a house that looked abandoned. Inside, she kept the lights off and spoke in a whisper. "Grenton isn't a city," she told me. "It's a covenant. Everyone here is part of it, whether they want to be or not. The disappearances, those are sacrifices. The city demands them." I asked who demanded them, but she just shook her head. Not who, what? Before she could say more, a knock rattled the door. Marissa's face went pale. "They know you're here," she hissed. She shoved a scrap of paper into my hand and pushed me toward the back. I slipped out into the woods as voices called her name. When I looked back, men in robes were dragging her out of the house, their faces calm, their eyes empty. The paper she had given me was a map. It led to the outskirts, to an old factory that had been shut down for decades. I went there the next day, breaking in through a rusted side door. Inside, I found rows of books, not factory equipment. Ledgers filled with names, dates, and symbols. The missing people. Every single one of them had been recorded here, with the words, "Given to Grenton," written beside their names. That's when I heard footsteps. I hid behind a shelf as the robed figure from City Hall entered the room. He wasn't alone. Chief Harlow walked with him, along with half a dozen others I recognized from around town. They spoke calmly, like colleagues in a meeting. "The reporter's close," one of them said. "Tonight we bring him in." I didn't wait to hear more. I slipped out, heart pounding, and drove straight toward the city limits. But every road was blocked by police cars. Officers stood smiling, waving as if it were a parade. My phone had no service. My gas tank was draining fast. Grenton wasn't going to let me leave. That night they came for me. I woke to find candles burning in my hotel room, arranged in a circle around my bed. Chief Harlow stood at the foot, holding one of the ledgers. "Grenton cares for its own," he said, and the crowd repeated it in one voice. I tried to scream, but my voice was drowned out by the chant. The candles flared, the shadows stretched, and I felt something press against me, like invisible hands pulling me down into the mattress. I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke, I was standing in the town square, a candle in my hand, my voice chanting along with the others. My mind screamed to stop, but my body wouldn't obey. I saw a new face in the crowd, someone passing through, watching in horror as we all turned toward them at once. Now I understand the truth. Grenton doesn't just take people. It makes them part of itself. And once you belong forever.